Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. I am Cyril Martin, Communication Officer, and I'm honored to be once again your moderator for this important discussion on safety critical components. Today, gathered around the digital table, I have the pleasure of welcoming Joseph Doppelbauer, the Executive Director of ERA, Nathalie Duquesne, Project Officer within the Safety and Operations Unit at ERA, Jean-Marie Deschamps, Team Leader within the Planning and Approvals Delivery Unit at ERA, Giuseppe Ragusa, Maintenance Engineering Project Officer at Trenitalia, and with us today as a representative of the CEM, the European Committee for Standardization, Leonardo Cozza, Rolling Stock Maintenance Engineer at Trenitalia TPER, and Raymond Groves, Operational Safety Director at Alstom. Thanks to all of you for being with us today. Before I hand over to Joseph Doppelbauer for an introductory speech, I would like to remind you that, as usual, we encourage all participants to actively engage in the discussions and share their perspectives by asking questions to our speakers using the chat function, which you will find at the top right-hand corner of your screen. We have allocated time to answer as many questions as possible at the end of this webinar. A last word to say that this event is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel and our website in the coming hours. Without further ado, I now hand over to the Executive Director of the agency, Joseph Doppelbauer. Please, Joseph, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Cyril, and good afternoon, everyone. The European Union Agency for Railways, ERA, has in its mission moving Europe towards sustainable and safe railway system without frontiers. In this mission statement, you can easily identify three keywords. You see without frontiers, which relates to the interoperability aspects the agency is charged with. You see sustainable, and sustainable can be interpreted in two ways. Firstly, ecological, and secondly, economically. And we also have the keyword safe. Railway safety is a key priority for our agency. As you know, rail has a very strong reputation for safety, but nonetheless, very rarely significant accidents occur. You might remember the tragic accident in Greece that happened on the 28th of February this year. And tomorrow is the 25th anniversary of the tragedy of Eschede in Germany, a train accident in which 101 people died and 88 people were severely injured. In this accident of the ICU1 in Eschede, the root cause was related to a failure of one wheel. And there we are immediately in the middle of the topic of safety critical components. Railway safety is about protection of life and property. And in the agency, we do this through regulation, through our role in assessing and certifying safety management systems, and we do it by promoting a common approach to safety, working closely with all stakeholders, and we have a specific focus on human and organizational factors. Safety management and safety in railways is always about management of risks. And of course, the risks that we have to manage are train collisions, front to front, front to rear, flank, collisions with the infrastructure. We have derailments, we have staff risks, we have station risks, and of course, very tragically, non-authorized persons. In the risk assessment, safety critical components play an important role. With the fourth railway package, in particular with the Interoperability Directive of 2016, the definition of safety critical components was introduced, and I'm sure that Nathalie and Jean-Marie will come back to this definition, A safety critical component is a component that has the credible potential to directly lead to a serious accident. And further to the Railway Safety and Interoperability Directive, the TSIs in 2019, in particular the Loc&Pas and the Wagon TSI, included some more precisions on the safety critical components. It is important to identify safety critical components to a risk assessment, and this risk assessment has to start already in the design phase, but it is also going through to the operation and maintenance phase, and in particular ECMs play a critical role. The purpose of this safety assessment, this risk assessment, is of course to minimize or to eliminate safety critical components. This can be done either by the architecture or by a functional design. Unfortunately, not all of these safety critical components can be eliminated. I'm coming back to wheels that I mentioned at the beginning of my speech. So we have a very, very relevant issue here, and one element that is also shown by this webinar is the cooperation and sharing of information between all relevant stakeholders. And with that, I wish all of you a very interesting webinar, and I hand over now to Nathalie for introducing in detail the program of today's webinar. Nathalie, vous avez la parole.
Thank you a lot, Mr. Doppelbauer. You have already explained a lot of things. So now I think it will just remind for a lot of people. So thank you for that. Before to start, I would like just to give you the view, what we will aboard today. The agenda, it will be first result of the survey that we have launched before the webinar, some information about definition and methodology. After this explanation concerning definition and methodology, we will have the feedback, first from a railway undertaking ECM, but also from a manufacturer, that it could be highlight what we have put in our regulation or in the standard. And we will have, if you are interested and if you have some question, it will be a pleasure for us to answer to your questions. Some words about the survey. It was the first time that we have organized this type of survey before the webinar, just to focus your needs and also to understand your needs. So we have received 14 answers, and as you can see on the map, from different countries. We have received answers from ECM managers, railway undertakings, quality managers, people dealing with spare parts for rolling stock, NSA, mechanical laboratory, and consultant. Thank you a lot for this answer, and we have highlighted, and you will see in our presentation that we have take care about your answer and your questions. Now, I will not go deeper in all the answer, but just to give you the summary. Concerning the first question about definition of safety critical and component, for the majority, the definition was okay. But understanding is sometimes challenging. There is a need for more explanation on meaning of critical, single failure, and difficulties not to take into account the safety mitigation measures already in place. It was mentioned as a difficulty. Concerning the comprehension about the definition of component, we receive a lot of information concerning the problem of software component, and we have to take care about it. Confusion also with the other components? Is it interoperability constituent? Is it the spare parts? We can conclude that definition needs to be improved. Concerning the feedback, because as we will explain after, it's important to have perhaps in the different actors a feedback on a new safety critical component. So on this question, at this moment, no. You don't put a new safety critical component, but they explain that in some cases, there is a good cooperation with the manufacturers. Of course, sometimes there are still difficulties to obtain from the manufacturer the list of safety critical components. What about the procedure in your management system related to safety critical components process? Is it okay for you to have specific procedure? And we receive yes. They do that via internal engineering procedures, or specifically for ECMs, we can note it in the answer a relevant exchange between maintenance delivery function and maintenance development function. An important question, and I think it is for me the most important, because for me this type of identification is also something very important about the collaboration. We ask what about the collaboration between the different actors, the keepers, railway undertaking, infrastructure manager, ECM, manufacturer or holder. We receive answer that it was difficult to get information from other parties, even if it is clearly stated in the contract. It is a difficult issue. And about, if you know the CEN technical report 17696, the guide for identification and management of safety critical component, the majority knows that technical report. They use this standard to build the process for identification of safety critical component. And now perhaps these two questions were more to have some ideas for the next webinar, to develop some typical webinar. We ask the question about the knowledge of SAIT. The majority explain yes, but they express the idea that there is a need to be more advertised, disseminated and explained. The sector doesn't know really what to record inside this tool. And about the question if any assessment body comment the content of the safety critical list, no. On the list, but we receive information that there is sometimes an assessment concerning the process, not on the list, but concerning the process used for the elaboration of the list. So thank you a lot for your answer, and we use them to highlight better our presentation. And I would like to give the floor to Jean-Marie, the daddy a bit of the safety critical component explanation concerning the problem statement. Jean-Marie, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I will first speak about the problem statement and the reasons why we have developed, together with the commissions, the stakeholders and the authorities, the concept of safety critical components. Is that for many years, there were attempts made by the stakeholders and authorities to develop safety critical components list. And especially systematically after a very catastrophic accident, there were huge attempts to do it. However, there has never been any consensus on the meaning of critical and on which components should be taken into account. And as results, when some attempts made achievements, we could see that all the components were considered as safety critical. But if all the components of a train is considered as safety critical, nothing is critical. There were only consensus on the very obvious one, as the wheel sets, the axles, the bearings. But when there were discussions to go further, they failed quite systematically. However, everyone were conscious that the criticality means strengthened rules for operation and maintenance. And everyone agrees that the criticality depends on the vehicle design on one side, but also on the context of operation, the context where the vehicle is operated. For instance, if we can take another system that the obvious one is the external door locking systems on passenger vehicles. The criticality may depend one side of the specific design and on aspects linked to reliability, availability, or maintainability, but also on the operational context. And so for a series of vehicles, these locking systems may be considered critical in some operational context and because of its specific design, and not for any other series of vehicles. So after years and years of discussions with the Commission and with stakeholders, national safety authorities, and sometimes with investigation bodies, the European Commission introduced in the fourth railway package the concept of safety critical components. However, the works were not sufficiently developed, the achievements were not sufficiently mature to have really something consistent in the new safety directive and the new interoperability directives. That's why also the Commission's requested to the agency to make recommendations on different aspects on, for safety critical components. And in 2018, we addressed a recommendation to the European Commissions after many discussions with the stakeholders, with the national safety authorities, with internally to the agency also. And we propose a definition of safety critical components that was based on the concept of single failure, the reference to the serious accidents already defined in the legislations, and the credible potential. That means that the event must be sufficiently credible to be taken into account in order to define such components. But we didn't stop there. We also made recommendations on who is involved in the management of safety critical components. And we highlighted first the manufacturers, the ECMs, and the railway undertakings, but also on second line, if I can say, the infra managers, the keepers, and all the others who can intervene until the National Safety Authority or the National Investigation Body. And we define a proposal for the requirements for the processes that some of those stakeholders have to implement, and also some requirements about outcome of some processes, especially for the manufacturer at the design and manufacturing phase, to be included in the technical documentations provided to the sector. In 2019, our recommendations were taken into account and were incorporated in one side the TSI amendments, especially for rolling stock wagons and for passengers vehicles, and also in the ECM regulations regarding the specific process to be put in place by the entity in charge of maintenance. And after we continue to work on that and with the stakeholders, partially also with the authorities, and in strong collaborations with CEN, we developed they developed, but we support it. They developed a document, a guide for implementing the regulations related to safety critical components. That was in 2021, and now you could experiment a lot of cases for defining safety critical components among ECMs and among manufacturers. And now I will give the floor to Nathalie to go more in detail about what we have developed and what has to be taken into account.
Thank you, Jean-Marie. Now, Mr. Doppelbauer explained very well the definition of the safety critical component. So it is just a reminder. Safety critical components are components for which a single failure has a credible potential to lead directly to a serious accident resulting in stated consequences. So Jean-Marie explains that we share this problematic with the WG48 of Sensenelec, and I would like to take the opportunity today to say that it is very nice where we have to develop something in the regulation, and when we can trust the Sensenelec group to explain what we put in our regulation, and that it was very interesting in this context of safety critical component. Of course, you will retrieve the information concerning safety critical component first in the agency regulation, interoperability directive, safety directive, TSI revision, where you can find the correct definition of safety critical component in TSC, Loc&Pas and Wagon, and also in the ECM regulation, where we have started to say some requirements for the entity in charge of maintenance concerning the management of these safety critical components. The same, you can find a lot of explanation. It was what Giuseppe will explain after in this CINTR 17696, where you can find all this information concerning definition and terminology, but also some help how to put in place the process to identify safety critical component. The same, I would like to remind that it is very important to have this definition in mind. What you can find also in the standard, it's for some people, it's better to speak about safety-related component, and you can see on this diagram that safety critical components is a part of this safety-related component, and we will see after how to make the difference. If we take, and I put the words in red, single failure. Single failure, you can find an explanation in our regularity text what it is a single failure. Components. Components, as we receive in your answers, that of course we have some information or some help in the EN 15380, that it is true, how to start with the component and how to build the list of components. And we have also the definition of serious accident in the safety directive with means any train collision, derailment, you can see it. Of course, to help you, and it is a real example of the collaboration with Sensenelec, you can find in this standard a table with the list of accident. Of course, when we speak of accident, it is non-exhaustive in this standard. And now, what it is for me is crucial, and I would like to say that it is very, very, very important. Of course, you are different actors to be involved for safety critical component. But what it is the most important between highway undertaking, keeper, entity in charge of maintenance, manufacturer, you need to collaborate and to dialogue about the safety critical components. Of course, the first list for a new vehicle, and we will see after, will come from manufacturer, but what it is important is with this safety critical component, we need to have the input of highway undertaking, ECM, keeper, to build together a real list of safety critical components. Maybe, as Mr. Doppelwer explained, we can reduce this, but also to improve the barriers, the safety barriers, to be more resistant in case of accident. Now I would like to give the floor to Giuseppe. He will explain the methodology, what is involved, how we can make the identification, some method, one FMECA and FTA, and also what are the safety critical components deliverables. Giuseppe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Natalie. So just good afternoon to all the participants of this webinar, and go down on the topics. So what is involved? Just to summarize, this is more or less an extraction from the SEN technical report 7696. We, as working group 48 of the SEN TC 256, started to develop this technical report just in time with the issue of the ECM regulation. And the SEN issued the technical report in October 2021. So this is just a slide to show you what is involved, new vehicle and existing vehicle. What does it mean? New vehicle is a vehicle, a new vehicle produced by the manufacturer and through the authorization process, complying with the regulation 545/2018, it will be analyzed to discover also safety critical components. For the existing vehicle, what is the meaning for the existing vehicle? Is when the existing vehicle is changed in case of technical change. So in this case is involved the manufacturer or the entity managing the change, and both need to manage the identification of safety critical components through the authorization process as for the new vehicle. The third process is the maintenance process. So this involves the ECM. So during the maintenance process, the ECM needs to manage already identified safety critical components and may discover potential safety critical components. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this is the first step. This is the perspective from manufacturer and entity managing the change. So on the left of the slide, we at the start of the process during the concept preliminary design related to a new vehicle or related to the change, to the renewal or the refurbishment of the existing vehicles. During this phase, through the risk-based analysis, the manufacturer or the entity managing the change identifies potential safety critical components. So the first decision process is it practicable to design out the safety critical components, in this case redesign, or if not, so this is the process to produce the deliverables for safety critical components. The list, the operational and maintenance requirements with the collaboration of the Reway undertaking, the keeper and the ECM, and the risk assessment principles and methods used. And to insert this kind of deliverables as documentation inside the technical file in the part of the maintenance documentation and in the operation documentation. Next slide, please. So this is another important slide. This is the perspective from ECM in the identification process. Here we have on the left the vehicle during the operation or during the maintenance, and the ECM processes involved for the identification process are when there is a change to the maintenance file, or during the monitoring activities, or applying the continuous improvement. This is related to the application of the ECM Regulation 779/2019. So in the first case, when a potential new safety critical components is discovered, or the ECM need for manufacturer support for already discovered safety critical components, in this case involve and join a communication with the manufacturer, with the holder of the vehicle authorization and the holder of the vehicle type authorization. So when the manufacturer is not identified, is not on the market, more or less. So in this case, the ECM needs to perform directly the risk-based analysis to confirm if the potential new safety critical component is correctly identified, and in this case needs to provide for the deliverables, so the confirmation, the requirements, the principles and the methods. When the manufacturer is already on the market, so this is the role of the manufacturer. The manufacturer needs to confirm the new safety critical components, or to respond to the request of support for the safe integration, for instance, or to provide for new requirements about the safety critical component, and to update the documentation and provide for updating the technical file, so that the maintenance documentation and the operation documentation. Next, please. Thank you. Okay, this is another important view related to the method. How to identify safety critical components through the risk analysis. This we have identified in Working Group 48 in the SEN Technical Report 17696, two methods, but these are just two examples, more or less. The first example is using the FMICA, so starting with the breakdown structure of the vehicle, identifying functions of a component and failure modes and causes related to the failure. So evaluating effects on the railway system, and the first box for the decision is to apply. This is the reference to the table 1 of the SEN technical report, where we identified a list of accidents. And so the first question is, can the effect on the railway system potentially lead directly to one accident in the list? So if the answer is yes, so next question is, can the accident have one of the consequences in the list? So we developed a list of consequences in table 2 of the technical report. And if yes, the last decision box is, can the event be considered credible by expert judgment? This is a very important decision box, because we, as expert of the market, so in Working Group 48, just to give you this information, we have railway undertaking representative, ECM representative, manufacturer representative. So more or less all the railway sector is more or less represented. And we introduced the expert judgment in this last decision box to consider the failure mode, the historical statistics of the components, the return on experience from operation and maintenance, the scenarios of the operation of the vehicle, the component data sheet, for instance, and also safety recommendation reports available or measures already in operation for the safety critical components. If all the decision boxes are yes, so the component is safety critical. In case of one no, the component is not safety critical. So next slide, please. So this is the identification method number 2, using the 4-tree analysis, and starting with the top event on the left of the part of the slide, and considering as top event the combination by OR logic gates of the accidents in the table 1 provided in the SEN technical report, and developing the 4-tree analysis down to the level of basic event. When you identify a partial of a complete loss of function of a component due to a failure mode, so you need to identify all the minimal cut sets. This is just a definition inside the technique of the 4-tree analysis. So if the minimal cut sets contain just one event, so the minimal cut set is of order 1. If yes, the component inside the minimal cut set is potentially critical. If not, you can discard the minimal cut set. So next box for the decision is, can the accident have one of the consequences in the list using the table 2 of the SEN technical report? And if yes, the last one is the same of the previous one method. Can the event be considered credible by expert judgment? And so using the expert judgment, if all the decision boxes are yes, the component is critical. Otherwise, the component is not safety critical. So next, thank you. So this is more or less an overview of the deliverables from the risk-based analysis, where we showed just 2 methods, but there are many others anyway. So starting from the risk-based analysis, we have the first is the safety critical component is identified. So the first item is to insert the safety critical component in the list. The second one is the outputs of risk-based analysis, and we have support for safe integration of safety critical components, the developing specific operational and traceability requirements in collaboration with railway undertaking and keeper, and on the other side, developing specific servicing and maintenance traceability requirements with the collaboration of the ECM. The third bullet point is the principles and method used. So in the last part, we have more or less, but it's quite difficult to read on these boxes, I know, and I see this. Okay, but the last part is to insert all the deliverables to update or to produce the first technical file. So in case of new vehicle, you produce the technical file to gain the authorization, or to update the technical file and more or less the operation documentation, inserting the safety critical components list and the safety critical components operation requirements. And on the other side, updating the maintenance documentation and including the safety critical components list and the safety critical components maintenance requirements, the updating the maintenance description file and the maintenance design justification file with the principles and methods used. So that's probably this is the last one. Next, yes, okay. So thank you for the attention. I leave the floor to Leonardo. Leonardo is representing railway undertaking and ECM.
Hello there, and good afternoon. I'm Leonardo Cozza, and I'm representing the railway company Trenitalia Tipper. In particular, my ECM, that is Gianmarco Springer, who cannot attend this webinar, unfortunately. So, as a fleet maintenance engineer and as a company which develop and study safety critical components, we are studying and working with that in a lot of ways. And we can go to the next slide, please, in which we'll see the table of contents that we'll see in my part. So again, next slide, please. And a small presentation about Trenitalia Tipper. We are a brand new company which is made by two shareholders that are Trenitalia, the main shareholder, and Tipper. So we have train coming from the previous fleet of Tipper and new fleet of Trenitalia, in particular Hitachi Roc and Alstom Pop, as you can see on the screen in the back. And in particular, some of these trains, those trains are owned by Trenitalia and rent to us, and some of them are owned by Trenitalia Tipper. While for the Tipper fleet, the owners remain tipper and we use them. It's particular also because the 4 functions of the ECM are distributed in a particular way, and we'll see them more specifically later. But we can just say that for the Trenitalia and Trenitalia tipper fleet, we are doing the function 1, 3, and 4 of the ECM, while the function 2, the engineering function, is done by Trenitalia. While the tipper fleet, on the contrary, has also the function 4. So function 2 and 4 are done by Maffer, that is a tipper company, while function 1 and 3 are done by us. And just to complicate more the situation, we have also 3 very brand new CZ Loco D744, for which all the 4 functions of the ECM are done by CZ Loco. So it's more and more complicated. And we are very proud of our travelers and our resources. Just few words. In particular, today we have reached we are reaching on today over 170,000 travelers per day. Maybe because of the holiday and because our trains to go directly on cities that are on the beaches, but we are very proud of that. So again, next slide, please. And this is how we work on the safety system and on the safety regulations. In particular, our company has a structure that is related to the safety and the safety of and the safety of railway operations. And in particular, we are doing all of our work in compliance of the regulation that Giuseppe and Natalie explained very well before, and in particular with the regulation 779. So again, next slide, please. And as said before, I will not annoy you with another explanation of the safety critical components, because Natalie and Giuseppe were beautiful about that. And in particular, as they said, there is a quite little difference between new vehicles that are required entering in the market and in the railway with safety critical components described and the existing vehicles. In particular, our trains are in this specific situation. So our existing vehicle, because they are brand new but are prototypized and authorized before of the enter of the regulation 779 and the definitions of safety critical components. So we have the duty of identify potential SCCs during the maintenance, and for every situation or renewal, upgrading, refurbishment, modification, even little, we have to analyze them, make a risk assessment, evaluate if this is concerning safety situations, and then if all the process, as Giuseppe said before, go to yes, then you find a new safety critical components, and so you have to follow the regulations about that. So again, next slide, please. And this is our procedure to identify and manage safety critical components. That is the PS 28. As I said before, here is described which vehicles are owned by Trenitalia and Trenitalia Tipper, and then they are all the four functions of the ECM are done by Trenitalia Tipper, while the function 2 is done by Trenitalia, and the Maffer trains. In particular, this is again a very specific situation because we have 10 locomotives E464 that were built from Bombardier, now Alstom, from the Tipper fleet. So the function 2 and 4 are done by Maffer, a Tipper company, while we have, but it's not listed in this slide, 6 E464 that we use for helping trains in difficulties on the rail, so that they are failured and cannot move by itself safely. So with these 6 locomotives, we help them, and in particular these 6 locomotives are owned by Trenitalia and rent to us. So this procedure allow us to have an homogeneous way of evaluating safety critical components, or also for these rolling stocks that are common between the two companies that are the shareholder of our company. In particular, our main goal as Trenitalia Tipper is to have that the Maffer E464 are very similar. I think that they will be equal to the ones of Trenitalia in order to have an equal treatment of them. And then next slide again, please. Here are the identification of the safety critical components done by Hitachi for the ROC trains, 4, 5, and 6 coaches trains, and they were very detailed in what is considered by them safety critical component, and in particular on the left, in red and black, we have a short list of the main parts that they consider safety critical components on the train. On the right, we have the same list, but it's in Italian. So for universal point of view, this is what they consider safety critical components. So sorry if you hear some parties external my room, but I think that there is a football party or somewhat.
It's fine. We don't hear it. We don't hear it. It's fine. Thanks.
Thanks. So sorry about that, but it's also complicated to talk about something that is very important with the noises. So and in particular, when we are dealing with safety critical components, we satisfy the maintenance requirement for the operation of traceability, identification by serial number for example, bogie, exiles, and whatever, and qualification of the maintainers to carry out the activities. So again, next slide, please. While for the other trains that are composing our fleet, the manufacturers hasn't given to us a list of what they consider safety critical components. So with Trenitalia, both as ECM, we have decided and chosen the wheel set for the POP trains, 3 and 4 coaches, as safety critical components. While this is a brand new train, we are studying this in a very strict way to be as clear as possible about that. And for existing vehicles, we cannot say old because some of them has less than 10 years. We also identified the wheel set as safety critical components. And our next step are concerning the information to the manufacturer of what it can become or is becoming or is identifying as safety critical components, when and where necessary. We will make requests to the manufacturer for technical and engineering support about safety critical components, and then we are always collaborating with the manufacturer to develop specific maintenance, traceability, servicing, and whatever to treat in the correct way the safety critical components. Again, next slide, please. And in particular, as function 3 and 4, we are doing a lot of technical meetings, in particular also for the fleet for which we are not function 4. So, for example, with Muffer, as I said before, that are function 2 and 4, we have technical meetings every week. So the last was last Monday, and the next will be the next Monday, and so on, in order to trace and treat every single failure that concern their fleet in order to analyze them. While for the Trenitalia fleet, these meetings are separated between the fleet. So we have meetings for rock trains and meeting for pot trains. Also with that, we have return of experience about the maintenance. We also have many audits from the certifiers, from the ANSFISA, that is the regulator agency in Italy, and to our components dealers and the manufacturers, so with Alstom and Hitachi, and also to Muffer, and our studies of engineering to evaluate them. So again, next slide. And as a part of the engineering process, we are studying and learning and analyzing SCC as required by that regulation. In particular, also with Trenitalia, we still consider the function of organo di sicurezza, that is safety component, in compliance with the decree number 4 of the 2012 of the ANSF, now ANSFISA, as I said before, that defines the responsibilities and the operating methods of the training delivery process, the certification and maintenance of the skill of the personnel who carry out the security activity of vehicle maintenance. In particular, this decree stabilizes also the studies and the exams that every personnel who took care or was doing the maintenance about the safety components. But it's now clear that the regulation of safety critical components is leading to the next level of safety and to the maximum safety criteria for the railway system. And next slide. So I can thank you for this opportunity and for your support.
Thank you very much, Leonardo. I directly hand over to Raymond Groves now. I recall our audience that you are Operational Safety Director at Alstom. Please, Raymond, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cyril, and thank you for the opportunity from the agency to present the experience and return of experience from the manufacturer and the ECM. I work for the services part, which is the after-sales part, And as ECM, we have 36 certificates in Europe today, over 11 EU countries. Next slide, please. So starting off with the manufacturer. The manufacturer's point of view is really to deliver a new build vehicle for authorization to place into service for the first time. So the requirements coming from the fourth railway package relating to the creation of the safety critical components are identified, as was said before by Natalie and Giuseppe, in the safety directive, the interoperability directive and the TSIs. The ECM Regulation 779 introduced two new requirements. One was that of the safety critical components, which is pertinent for the maintainer, for the manufacturer, and also the introduction of the safety tool, which is for the ECM. The amendment to the TSI Loc&Pas introduces this new requirement for the manufacturer to produce the initial safety critical component list. So as I said before, for the manufacturer, the interest is for the vehicle authorization under the EU Directive 545. The people doing this data will be the rolling stock RAMs, reliability, availability, maintainability, safety teams, and they're responsible for the creation of the initial safety critical components list and the associated methodology, the risk assessment, and to put that into the respective files. If we look at the ECM regulation, clause Article 4.5a, it says the manufacturer shall manage information on safety critical components and the appropriate maintenance instructions related to them through reference in the technical file of the subsystems. Next, please. So what I've tried to illustrate here, on the left-hand side in green, you see the role of the manufacturer, and on the right-hand side in yellow, you see the role of the ECM maintainer. So as I said previously, the RAMs team are responsible for doing the list or creating the list. So they create the safety critical components list and provide any associated traceability requirements. And this goes into the second column, which is the orange bit there that is talking about authorization. And it is then added into the safety critical components list is then added into the technical file in accordance with 797 interoperability. Also, as well as, sorry, can you go back? Also, as well as providing the safety critical components list, the RAMs team has to provide details of where the safety critical requirements came from. So in other words, the risk assessment methodology. That detail needs to be added into the maintenance design justification file. And so those two orange blocks are new requirements with the fourth railway package regulations that mean that these will be required in order to gain vehicle authorization. In blue, I've put the fact that coming from the RAM studies, the safety studies, there will also be some requirements that are put into the maintenance documentation for the maintainer and the operator, which are there purely for safety. So they're not there for reliability purposes or passenger comfort purposes, but purely for safety. If we go to the right-hand side there for the yellow section, the responsibility of the entity in charge of maintenance is defined in 779 regulation, and it's basically fully complying with the Annex 2 requirements. Having received the safety critical components list from the manufacturer, the initial safety critical components list, it is then the responsibility of the maintainer to upkeep or to maintain the safety critical components list throughout the life cycle of the vehicle for as long as they are responsible for the ECM. And then at the bottom, we've got request for new safety critical component risk assessment. So the maintainer is then responsible and in charge of the SCC list, and they can add or remove things from that. And if required, they can ask for assistance from the manufacturer. Next slide, please. So as Leonardo showed earlier, and you can see here, the safety critical components lists do exist. They are a thing. So this is just an example that we have from, I think it's from a bogey. And this really is fulfilling the requirements of the Interoperability Directive and the ECM Regulation. And at the bottom there, I've put its safety critical components list aims to prioritize safety critical components during the maintenance activities, ensuring they receive special attention. But again, from the manufacturer's point of view, it's part of the deliverable in order to gain vehicle acceptance. Next slide, please. If we go a little bit deeper into the detail of this, this is just an extract from what essentially is a FAMICA here. And if we look at the elements that could contribute to this, and this is again an example for a subsystem, the bogie subsystem, there are elements around the bogie frame, the wheel set swing arm, the wheel set shaft motor bogie, and the wheel set shaft running bogie, and the longitudinal guide. And most of them are associated with breakages that will obviously lead to the hazard derailment. So elements included in the safety critical components list with the failure modes are considered as well. Next slide, please. So in order to provoke a bit of discussion and debate, from the manufacturer's point of view, it's interesting that there are actually two requirements on the manufacturer. One of them comes from the serious accident definition, which is in the Railway Safety Directive and also in the ECM regulation. And that talks about serious accident, but also in order to demonstrate safety of the vehicle, you have to do a demonstration in accordance with the risks, the CSM risk assessment 402/2013. And that uses a slightly different criteria. That uses the criteria of critical accident, meaning one fatality, or catastrophic accident, meaning more than one. So in some ways, you have to do different analysis for different audiences or for different requirements. So the safety demonstration for vehicle authorization uses the accident scenario, catastrophic and critical, and the CSM evaluation also uses that in 402. So the SCC list is the initial list that's given, and once the vehicle is being used in revenue service, then you'll get some return of experience from the railway undertaking and the ECM that can look in more detail at things like the operational context, because the definition of serious accident also includes consideration of infrastructure damage and environmental issues. And I would argue that these are better served in the O&M phase when you understand what happens there. The final point is that obviously the calculations are done before the train goes into revenue service. So during the life cycle or during the life of the operation of the vehicle, it can change. The mission profile can change. You can have different routes, etc. And therefore you'd have to reconsider those as you get a change in operational usage. Next slide, please. In terms of the ECM, the entity in charge of maintenance, Leonardo has described this well already, but one of the requirements that I mentioned earlier was any safety requirements in the operation and maintenance instructions, including the discrete safety critical components list. The people writing the maintenance instructions sometimes refer to the safety analysis in order to identify which tasks are there for safety. The ECM is responsible for management of the SCC list during the whole of the O&M phase, for which it's in charge. And an example from our side is that Alstom maintains around 20% of fleets that are not built by us. We are not the OEM for these vehicles. They may be old or there may be other manufacturers' vehicles. Many of the vehicles that we are maintaining now and many of the vehicles in Europe were in place, were operationally in place before the fourth railway package and for the ECM regulations. So it's likely, it's the fact that no safety critical components list exists. and there's no requirement in the regulation or the guidelines for it to be retrospectively generated by either the manufacturer or the ECM. However, as has been pointed out by Giuseppe earlier, if there is a modification or change, then the ECM would have to assess if there are any requirements to change the safety critical components list. A final word on the SEN technical report. It is very useful because in the appendix for the ECM, excuse me, it does give you some clues and techniques on how to generate the SCC list using techniques like Formica and fault tree analysis. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is just a screenshot of an example of a maintenance documentation. On the left is a paper documentation. On the right is a digital version. But the interesting thing here is the traceability this red flag gives, saying that this is there for safety reasons. And that's there for awareness. It's there for any special requirements for competency, quality checks. So this concept of an increased look at something that's safety critical as opposed to something that's not safety critical is incorporated here. Next slide, please. So my conclusions from this is that the regulations for the 440 package introducing the safety critical requirements affect the manufacturer and the ECM. For the manufacturer, they're initially concerned with the production of the SCC list in order to get vehicle authorization. So the SCC list is included in the technical file, and the risk assessment method is included in the maintenance justification file. The ECM is then responsible to manage the SCC list for the remainder of the O&M lifecycle. For example, it could be tagging the safety critical components in the work instructions, ensuring adequate control, process and compliance with CSM monitoring, as was mentioned by Leonardo, and identifying new or changes to components that may affect the safety critical components list. So upgrades, new technologies, that sort of thing may mean that you need to amend the SCC list. We've shown you two examples. So again, the SCC list does exist, and we've seen a little bit of the detail of some of the items in there. From a manufacturer's point of view, we will question the requirement to do safety demonstration under two definitions, one CSM RA and one safety critical components. Next slide, please. And the ECM and RU have the role during the O&M phase to better identify the environmental and infrastructure due to any change of mission or change of route over the life cycle of the vehicle operation. In terms of what to do about older vehicles, generally it's not retrospective, apart from, as we mentioned before, if there's a change or a modification. And just a word about the length, I think this was in one of the questions, of the safety critical components list. There is little sharing or feedback from any of the involved parties. Should the SCC list be just the wheel sets, in other words, one item, or should it be multiple items? We don't really get any views from any of the assessment agencies or external third-party bodies, and there's not really any feedback from the agency at the moment. Maybe this meeting will generate some. So finally, the manufacturer identifies the safety critical components, recognising their vital role as safety barriers against potential hazards, and the ECM ensures controlled maintenance of safety critical components through a robust documentation process and quality checks. These serve as additional barriers that effectively prevent potential failures. Thank you. Back to the agency.
Thank you very much, Raymond. It was very interesting. We are running a little bit late on the agenda, but the topics addressed really deserved it. We will now take some time to reply to your questions. So dear attendees, first, thank you for being so many with us today, because you are a lot, and for actively participating. So we identified some questions that we would like to ask first to Jean-Marie Deschamps, that is with us today in the agency. So Jean-Marie, we identified two questions that can be somehow linked and merged to one. First is, can the ECM remove some components from the SCC list received by the vehicle manufacturer based on its return on experience? So that's the first question. And maybe I ask the second one right away. Can devices outside the vehicle, for example, track sensors, be mitigating factors that remove the safety critical component from the list? Unmute yourself, please.
Yes. For the first question, it's clear that the manufacturer is producing the list of safety critical components for the vehicles based on its own risk analysis and its analysis. But it's clear that manufacturers have not the complete view, the complete understanding and detailed understanding on the context of operation. Therefore, taking into account the return on experience, the monitoring made by the ECM, the information received especially from operation and from the railway undertaking, it's up to the ECM to consider and to take the decisions to remove safety critical component for the list provided by the manufacturer, so that it's possible. It's under its responsibility. And for the second, yes, that's clear that when there are mitigation measures existing for safety in general implemented outside the vehicles, that's clear that they can have an influence, and they can also have an influence on the risk analysis. However, we consider that with the single failure and the credible potential to cause an accident, the evaluation must be done without taking into account the barriers and the existing barriers. The barriers will be the mitigations specific that will be developed to address the safety critical components. In particular, we do not advise to consider them directly within the analysis because those external barriers are sometimes outside the responsibility of the RU or the ECM, and therefore there is always a related risk that they are removed or changed, having an adverse impact on the safety critical component.
Thank you very much, Jean-Marie. We have now a question for Giuseppe Ragusa. Can you provide an example? No, sorry. Please explain when to use safety critical component and when to use safety related function that is described in EN 126. Please, Giuseppe.
Yes, okay, thank you. How to say, safety related is a general concept linked to the safety directive, linked to the also interoperability directive, but focused on the TSIs. So this is more or less obvious because manufacturer needs to provide for a safe vehicle. So safety related components, function, and so on need to be addressed by a manufacturer. This is a fact. On the other side, safety critical components need to be identified because the legislation indicates this duty to the manufacturer, and also inserted in TSIs, in the Loc&Pas and in the Wagon TSI. So both topics are very, very important, but the difference is that safety critical components are related to a specific definition related to serious accident, for instance, instead of safety related, because safety related is not necessarily related to serious accident, but is a concept in general.
Thank you very much. We have now a question for Natalie. Natalie, can you provide an example list of critical items? How many elements should it contain?
Thank you, Cyril. Oh, it's good to receive this type of question, because I would like to say that I can understand that for some railway stakeholder, it will be better to have a list. But I would like to explain again that if the agency or somebody provide a list, we will stop the reflection of some actors, and that it is very important to reflect on it. Now, however, I can say that, for example, wagons, I cannot say that wagons is something easier to build than a locomotive. I don't say that, but for wagons where there is less components, you can find a study from UIP, the representative of wagon skipper, who can help you, because they put on UIP site a guide how to define safety critical components, taking into account the standard, but also to give some example about what could be a list of safety critical components for a wagon. So I encourage everybody to have a look on it. Now for locomotive, because we have more components, and especially concerning, we don't speak a lot about it, but perhaps it will be the possibility to organize a new webinar on it. But for software components, it will be very difficult perhaps to reflect on it. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, Natalie. We have now a question for Leonardo. Leonardo Cozza, why can the ETR 104-103 as new train can get an authorization without a list of safety critical components? Leonardo.
Okay, that's I think a very good question, but in particular, these are new trains, but not as new as the regulations are. So the trains were authorized before that all these regulations were made. So unfortunately, they entered without a list of safety critical components.
Thank you very much, Leonardo. Raymond, we have a question for you. How to understand single failure in software?
It's an interesting question. It's a difficult one to answer. Software is there to perform a function. So it's not really fair to say that software has a single point of failure. If you're talking about software, we design software that performs safety critical functions, and that will have an allocated SIL rating. But it's really not a simple question or an easy question to answer about a single failure rate for software. I'm sorry, but that's my answer.
Thank you very much, Raymond. Thank you very much. And one last question now for Natalie. During the webinar, the interaction between the manufacturer and the ECM was clearly described. Can you give some more insight into the collaboration between ECM and railway undertaking? Does the ECM have a legal obligation to inform the RUs about the SCC list? Natalie.
Thank you, Cyril. Yes, we have in the regulation 779, Article 5, where it is stated that it is not only for ECM, but also for the user to exchange information about this safety critical component, but also about other perhaps problem. And for me, it was very crucial if you would like to increase the level of safety, to have this type of communication and exchange. Of course, as we have explained just at the beginning, that we have now the SAIT, Safety Alert IT tool, that it is typically for the sector to exchange information concerning vehicles and concerning maintenance. So yes, it is mandatory for an ECM, but for the user also to exchange information.
Thank you very much, Nathalie. This webinar is now coming to an end. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it and that it fulfilled your expectations. Thank you very much to you, Nathalie. Thank you for your enthusiasm, work, and dedication in preparing this webinar. Also, a big thank to all the speakers and the colleagues involved in the preparation of this event. A webinar is a team effort. Thank you for your time and dedication. Thank you, dear attendees, for attending this webinar today in such large numbers. We appreciate your time and interest in this topic. Before you go, we would be very happy to receive your feedback on this webinar via the QR code you're seeing right now on the screen. We look forward to meeting you again at one of our upcoming events. First, the upcoming webinar in 2 weeks about the TSI Revision Package 2023. It will be the first of 2 webinars dedicated to this topic. Just a word to say that these 2 webinars will have a slightly different structure than what we usually do. A significant amount of time will be dedicated to Q&A to allow the participants, whom we hope will be numerous, to ask any questions that they may have. Then I would like to bring your attention that the agency is organizing a safety leadership training on the 19th of June in the agency headquarters in Valenciennes, in France. This is an in-person training that requires prior registration. Only a few spots are left, so if you're interested, please visit the agency's website and sign up. Another event that requires prior registration is the ETCR seminar planned in July. There are still some seats available there as well. So if you're interested, same advice, please visit the agency's website and sign up. Last and not least, we are also very happy to announce that registration to the upcoming Safety Days that will take place in Tallinn, Estonia, in September, have opened very recently, yesterday. So if you're interested, please visit also the agency's website and register. We would be very happy to meet you there in person. In the meantime, and if you would like to stay updated on our activities, you can always sign into our database by selecting the button Login on our website page. And you can, of course, follow us whenever you want on our social media accounts, Twitter and LinkedIn. I wish you a very good end of the afternoon and in advance a wonderful weekend. Take care. Goodbye.